Hello everyone, this is Adrian from Technical Project Manager, and I'm happy to introduce you to a new member of the community on Technical Project Manager. His name is Roy, and today we're going to do an interview with him, and he's an IT project manager, so this will be the topic for today. Roy, welcome to the call.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks for having me.
Just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and where you live, and so on.
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, so I'm an IT project manager. I've been doing this for around 15 years now. Originally from Manila, Philippines. I've done project management in Manila, Singapore, Spain, and now in Germany. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about IT project management and whatever is interesting for the group.
Great. Yeah. So let's start with the general question. Like, how do you manage an IT project at all from your experience? What's the process?
Yeah, sure. I guess if we're talking about highlighting the comparison between a traditional project manager and explaining how it's different in the IT field, I think one aspect that really comes to mind is that there's a lot of testing that happens, and there's a particular type of testing that happens in IT. Mm-hmm. So in IT, you have to replicate the environments so that you do it in a very safe way. It's actually one of the things that I like in IT. You can't really break anything unless you intend to. And I say that because you really have to go through a lot of different phases before you quote unquote go live. It's the term that we use in IT project management. So yeah, I think that's one key difference. A lot of replication and a lot of testing. It's a very rigorous process that we try to employ so that we can do or basically make changes to what we call the live environment in a safe and controlled manner.
Okay.
Yep.
And since you mentioned like testing as a major step, like how do you organize a good test, or how do you create the environment to conduct the test in a safe way?
Sure. So there's different names depending on the company you work for, but typically you would have a minimum of 3 environments. You would have the production environment, so that's what we also call the live environment. Mm-hmm. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you would have the development environment, and in the middle you would have a testing environment. So the testing can happen in different iterations, but those 3 would be the basic ones that can. And your question was, how do you do the testing? So think of it as the development environment and the testing environment as actual copies of the production environment. That way, when you make a change in the development environment, you're doing changes to what seems like the production environment, and then you basically run unit tests at the start, and then when things are good, what that means is you've actually created something or a change in the system that matches what the business required. Then you move on to the next more formal test phase. So again, the test environment is also a copy of, or as much as possible, a very recent copy of the production environment. That way, you've actually deployed your changes in one instance, and then you can really minimize the risk of, basically it's a simulation of what it will look like when you, again, go live. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've worked as an IT project manager for many years, and so we also use this kind of setup of 3 different systems. I mean, it sounds easy in theory, what you explained, but what are the challenges like in real life situations in IT project management in general, like testing, but also the other aspects? What would you say are the top 3 or 5 challenges that every IT project will typically face?
So I think this is where we blur the lines between IT projects and other types of projects, because at the end of the day, you and I, we're communicators. As a project manager, we're communicators, and we're dealing with human beings at the end of the day. It's about being able to bring people together understand what one person needs, what one person can provide, and basically collaborating towards one goal. So to answer the question of what is the challenge, I always say project management is both a science and an art. So I already told you the process on how to mitigate that risk. You try to follow that process, but at the same time, it's an art because you can't really tell sometimes if you have everything that you need. Let me give an example. So we talked about at the start, you go to the development environment and then you try to build against specification. So you would have gone through a process of sitting down with your customer and trying to identify what exactly do you want to see in the system after we do this project. So that basically helps you list down the requirements, break it down into very specific items, basically what we call deliverables. So the problem that you could say one of the most common problems in not all of the requirements are understood between the two parties. So the people delivering and the people asking for it. Yeah, it's just human nature. Sometimes you say one thing and then there's not always the understanding between the two parties. So as a project manager, you try to come up with things like templates, agendas for meetings, as simple as that, so that you're able to capture the whole area of the IT system that you want to deliver. Because at the end of the day, you come there with a very good understanding of the system and what it could look like, and you guide the people who are giving the requirements. Then you just keep the communication lines open. And again, we're communicators. That's what we do. We do our best, and we try to lessen the issues because of any breaks in communication.
So understanding the requirements is a major challenge, you would say, in IT projects. Any other major obstacles that usually encounter?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if we're talking about IT projects in particular, lots can happen with an IT system. So typically, when it's a big project, your IT application, for example, doesn't sit in isolation. So your application is at one level, and below that will be your infrastructure. So things like servers, things like operating systems, all of these things need to be working in sync to make sure that everything works. So a lot of the preparation work is important, and when you do not know the system well enough, or you don't have the technical expertise to ask the right questions, or maybe to have a solution architect with you to help you ask the right questions about the implementation, then you actually increase the risk of something wrong happening because you didn't really think of everything. So for instance, maybe your application system is not connected to what's called an integration system. So as I said, your system cannot really perform in isolation. So it has to be connected to the different systems. Maybe your test environment wasn't set up such that it will talk to the other systems. So maybe an invoice coming into your financial system, it's not being sent to the next system or basically to run the payment, for example. Then it's not because you created something wrong. It's just because the setup wasn't done correctly because you weren't checking all the right things.
The landscape is required and it's to be set up. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, landscape.
Okay. And so you mentioned it's very interconnected. You have servers, you have different application layers and database. And what would you say, like how much do you as a IT project manager have to understand about these related areas? Like talking about yourself, like how well do you understand the other processes or other areas?
So in the world of IT, people like myself typically go deeper into a particular application or brand. In my case, it's SAP. So maybe 90% of the projects I've done are SAP projects, and that helps me to be very familiar with what needs to be connected, what needs to be already there, and what activities need to happen for a project to be successful. Saying that, it's actually not that different, because at the same time I've worked on the other 10% where I had to learn new systems, learn new ways of doing things, and work with a different type of customer. So in IT, I think well, I can say in IT project management, it's very important for us to keep the principles, that ability to communicate with people, and to be able to translate things in a way that's more understandable to the common person. I think that's something that I would be looking for in, let's say, a co-project manager, or if I'm helping our manager to hire someone into our team. I need someone who has the smarts, who has the intelligence to make things simpler. Because I know what you mean. Like, the question, I guess, alludes to the fact that, yeah, it can be a lot of jargon, it can be a lot of technical terms. But at the end of the day, you can ask, and you need this to come in. So it's really a lot of logic, and well, of course, we also need to consider time. As you do this longer, then you kind of ask questions better. And even the art side of it, I'm talking about the science first, the art side of it, of trying to see if a person is clear with the questions, like sitting in front of someone, and you can see in his face, like he actually didn't understand the question. So I would recommend things like tools, and I'm not talking about specific applications. I'm talking of using whiteboards, for example, or using maps, or using diagrams. So all of these things that can help your communication. Let me give one example, like doing a minutes of a meeting. Like at the end of a discussion, if you're able to write down, okay, you said this, and this is what it would look like for a data flow. So this moving to this, and sharing that with the person, and then giving the person a chance to say, actually, no, you missed something. Then that actually helps close the loop, and it ensures you that you actually captured what the other person was saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a smart way. Yeah, I think I fully agree. So the communication aspect is really key in project management, and in particular in IT, because you have nothing to show. Like, it's all virtual. It's all in bits and bytes, and it doesn't exist until the project is finished. So I think that's really important. So that you mentioned that. What was there a particular moment or a particular challenge you faced in a project that you still remember, and where you had a problem and you found the right solution, and you kind of applied that, and it turned out successfully? What was that, like a particular experience you had?
Yeah, so I think what really sticks in your mind are things when it didn't go wrong. When it didn't go right. I mean, the best, you can say that when a project does not reach its original objective, or basically, if the project doesn't succeed, it's a great way to pick up a lot of lessons. So I think there was one project that was particularly difficult. And again, at the end of the day, we take the IT aspect out of it, and it's just basically being aligned on objectives. So I think it's very, very important from top to bottom in the hierarchy of an organization, that you know where you want to be in the end. So let me try to make that concrete without mentioning confidential names or companies. If you're working on a program and you have conflicting leadership, basically, so because a company can have its finance function, its information or IT function, and all the other operations functions. So basically, you have different towers in the company, and if you don't get the buy-in of all the people involved, and cognizant that people are coming from different towers, they might be coming from different motives, or in those towers that I mentioned, you can also include external suppliers, so they would also have their different motives. So I think it's very important for people like us, and people who work with us, and people whom we work for, so sponsors, we need to all be aligned in what we're getting this group of people to do, because at the end of the day, we need everybody. to be working on the same thing. And yeah, if the motivations are different, let me again make it more concrete. If the goal of one group is just to get over the line to hit the date, then they might be just getting things over the line and just saying, okay, it's done. But at the end of the day, you still need a certain level of quality, isn't it? So it's very important, I think, and it's a very hard lesson to learn. It will take a few years and a lot of bruises and a lot of long nights. But it's very important to really take projects seriously, especially at the start, where we're getting people aligned on what needs to be done and checking the understanding and motivations of different groups.
And talking about motivations, what's your experience of like what's the attitude of the typical project team member? I mean, not the IT team member, but on the business side, like towards an IT project. Is that, would you say, has it been positive according to your experience, or what is kind of the attitude?
Yeah, sure. I think now we're going into the philosophy of how people work, which is a really important topic also in project management. I think at the end of the day, everybody wants to do good work. Otherwise it would be a case of like needing to fire people if there is malice behind a person being in a company. So let's take that baseline. The baseline is that everybody wants to do good work. Human nature would support the fact that we're trying to make things easier for everybody. And I think there's a big difference between thinking short term and thinking long term. So I say this because in projects, there's definitely growing pains, let's call it that. Because at the start, there will be change. There will be pain in growth. Like think of working out, for example. You go to the gym, you lift a lot of weights, and it will hurt the next day. But at the end of the day, if you have that goal of being stronger, being more muscular or more fit, then you do need to go through that pain. So I think it's important to, like I said with the previous question, it's about getting people on board with the right motivations. If they agree, yes, I want to get fit, yes, I want to be stronger, then this is the cost of that. We have to put the effort, the work in, and then we will get there if we work together.
Definitely touches what I've experienced as well. I mean, in general, I think it's not easy to build that winning team, especially for an IT project, because people are often like reluctant with the upcoming change, organizational change, technical change. They get a new system. So I think that's really a hard part and the key role of a project manager to build that team, and as you said, to align the different streams, like different goals of people, and to make sure that we all work in the same direction.
And the managers of those respective teams also need to be on board, because you can't ask a person to be part of a project and not recognize that this requires time. So I keep hearing that problem, like, okay, I'm not available to do testing. I'm not available for your 2-hour data requirement or requirements gathering session because I have my month-end closing coming up. So the manager needs to help out. Like, okay, day 0, 1, 2, 3, we cannot set any meetings because there is what's called BAU or business as usual that people need to focus on. But there's nobody else. The expertise is with the line team, the people in operations, in accounting, and all of the good daily BAU work. So yeah, everybody needs to help out. Everybody needs to find the time and recognize that it's not going to come out of thin air. There is cost. There is resource planning that needs to be done, schedules that need to be checked, and that's why we're here.
Absolutely. So you've been in project management for 15 years, you said, right?
That's right.
That's really a long time, because I know many PMs, they don't stay that long into such a job.
Yeah, it's I guess in retrospect, one of the reasons why I've stayed is that I like that in projects it's always new. The requirements are always new, and there's never really a boring day with projects. You know, I mean, if you don't have a project, then yeah, go on vacation. But with a project, you're really stretched, and I feel like it's a good mix of being a technical expert at, like I said, if you focus on one application, definitely just through the interactions you have, you will gain expertise. But at the same time, it is management. It's leadership as well. It's talking to people, motivating people, and I especially like that aspect. And putting those two things together, it's really something that I think who will learn from.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure you're doing a great job in that role because you are a communicator. So I can feel that. I can see that. That's great. Tell me, as you've been in the project management world for so many years, like what changes have you experienced, like in terms of project management methodology, like with upcoming agile, philosophy? What did you experience yourself, and what's your point of view on that?
So I think it's great. First and foremost, I think that it's great that people are seeing commonalities with how they work, documenting these things, and promoting them as well. So that's the good side of it. I like the fact that people are coming together and sitting down and saying, "Hey, I think there's a better way of doing this." And let's put it together. Let's create, in the case of Agile, let's create a manifesto, and it evolves into things like Scrum and different frameworks. So these are the good parts of it. But at the same time, as someone who's been doing it for a while, I think there are watch outs to all of this evolution and all of these new things coming along. I think at the end of the day, we should always recognize that the role of a project manager is important in that no one else has that task of making sure the communication lines are open, making sure that people are heard, basically. So a lot of very abstract things, and we can't expect our technical people, our developers, our solution architects to have the time to think of those things. So even if we have different frameworks coming in, we should always be able to go back to the different principles that have already been identified by, I forgot to check how long PMI has been around, but at least 50 or even 100 years. So this is, again, the same type of people who 50 years ago sat down and said, hey, you know what? We always do data gathering at the start. We always do monitoring and controlling. And why don't we come up with this framework? And I think it's all based on some kind of principle. So I guess to wrap it up, moving forward, we will always see new and better ways of doing things, but we should always be cognizant of basic principles or basic project management fundamentals.
And where would you draw the line? Specifically to agile, where does it make sense, and where is it maybe not the best approach? Like as a simple rule of thumb, yeah.
Yeah, I've actually seen an answer to that question because I've heard that question being asked a few times. I would recommend people to look up Wardley maps. So that's Wardley. So Simon Wardley, a British management who now has I believe company, but basically what he did was to illustrate, like in this he calls it a map because it follows different aspects of it follows the principle of, first and foremost, looking at the situation. So what that means is you don't automatically say agile is the best or waterfall is the best. The first step should always be understand what's going on, understand where you want to be. Again, the analogy of a map, you want to get somewhere. and then you try to match what's the best approach. So it will take us a while to actually go into diagram, but in essence, that's what it is. There's no, there are frameworks that fit certain situations. I mean, classic example, building a house, waterfall. Creating a new app where you're not really sure what the app will look like, agile. So I think that kind of sums it up. There will always be a framework that will match the requirement.
Great, thank you. Roy, to wrap it up, what's your advice to a project manager, like to a junior project manager? What should they focus on in that job? What's really the most important task or responsibility they should take care of to make sure the project is successful?
So I think if I had to give a message to a new project manager, my message would be that do not forget that this is about leadership. At the end of the day, it's about influence and being responsible for the outcome, and that is through working with people. And I think my own definition of, well, not my own, but something that I've tried to carry on over the years is that you really need to, I know it sounds a bit mushy, but you have to care about the people you work with. And if you care about the people you work with, that just makes you do your best as much as you can, and you listen better, and then they will see that. They will communicate better with you as well. So yeah, I mean, always remember that this is a position of leadership for whatever steps that for all of the steps that you've taken to reach that. Never take for granted that you are responsible for people, and it's a privilege to be a leader.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, I think that's also what kept me in the project management world, because I like working with people and working as a team. I think that's really that's what life is about. It's really great.
Yeah.
Great.
It's hard to achieve big things by yourself.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. Thank you so much, Roy. Looking forward to have you again here on YouTube in the future, and let's keep in touch. All the best to you.
Yes, please, and let me know if you're in Berlin. And thanks so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.